Good afternoon, Maryland municipal leaders. Happy Friday. Welcome to MML's continuing Newsmaker Town Hall series. I'm Scott Hancock, MML's Executive Director and your facilitator for today's Town Hall. We are really very pleased and excited to have Maryland's legislative presiding officers, the Speaker of the Maryland House of Delegates, and the President of the Maryland State Senate as our guests today. Before we hear from our first guest, Senate President Ferguson, a few logistical housekeeping items to share, and of course we always have those. Due to the large number of attendees on today's town hall, we will exclusively use the Q&A feature on this Zoom platform for any questions and or comments for our guest following their opening remarks. Please enter your questions in the Q&A found at the bottom of your screen, and we'll share as many of them as time allows today. And if we are unable to get to your question on air, we will share the remaining questions with the presiding officer staff so they can reply following today's program. But you may also email your questions to the senator at bill.ferguson@senate.state.md.us, or for the speaker, Adrienne.Jones at house.state.md.us. And secondly, please keep your questions brief and to the point. Please don't forget, MML is a nonpartisan organization under IRS rules, and we would appreciate you always remembering that. Thank you in advance for your cooperation and consideration. Our guest for the first 30 minutes of today's town hall is Senate President Bill Ferguson. Senator Ferguson, a Teach for America alum, moved to Baltimore City after graduating from Davidson College with a double major in political science and economics in 2005. And from 2005 to 2007, he taught U.S. history and U.S. government to 9th and 10th graders in a breakout academy of one of Baltimore's most challenged high schools. President Ferguson earned his master's degree in teaching from the Johns Hopkins School of Education in 2007. And then in 2010, he was elected to the Maryland State Senate to represent Maryland's 46th legislative district in Baltimore City. First serving on the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee, and then moved by then President Miller to the Budget and Taxation Committee, where he became vice chair of the committee and chair of the Education, Business, and Administrative Subcommittee. In January of 2020, you all remember, his colleagues unanimously elected him to serve as president of the Maryland Senate, making him the second youngest Senate president in Maryland's history. President Ferguson, thank you so much for making time in your very busy schedule during session to address Maryland's municipal leaders today. We are looking forward to your perspective about the state of the 2021 session.
Well, thank you, Scott. It is a pleasure to be here with you. And I know those who are here today, many are sort of in the midst of their own sort of chaos of operations of their municipalities. And so I was apologizing earlier that it's been a little bit of a lower energy because this has been one heck of a week. Today is the 45th day of session, so we are exactly halfway. And this was a week where, as I'm sure many have already experienced, we had our first real COVID challenge with a positive rapid test that was really at a time when we had to make some tough choices about whether we would follow our protocols and how that would impact the work. And we have had this issue with false positives where it's about a 14% error rate. And so we'd gone, 40 days testing every Tuesday and Friday, and we'd had a couple issues here and there, but this was the first one where we'd had it and there was some contact to other senators. And so it certainly got a lot of press early on, and we sort of expected that it might, but it was proof that we were going to follow the protocol that we set out. We spent a lot of time, as I know a number of the leaders on the call have done, trying to make sure that our protocols made sense, that they were based in science and health, and that they allowed us to function. This was the first real challenge. We're very fortunate. The tests ended up they came back negative, and everybody was able to return back the next day. And so while it was a kind of the first real hit, I'm glad it happened now and not right at sine die. I think everyone sort of felt a level of confidence. And, we're 45 days in, and we have not had, knock on wood, I always worry whenever I say this, but we've not had a single instance of a community transmission event on campus. That's going to get harder and harder as session goes forward, but I feel very confident in the systems that we've set up and that we have the right policies in place to kind of keep this work happening. And why it matters is because this work that we have to get done this year is unbelievably important. And you all know, I'm not saying anything new or exciting. That's, this is an unbelievably consequential time for the state of Maryland. And so I am, I'm blessed that we have gotten to where we are. We still have a lot of work left to do. So let me sort of just focus a bit on some of the big priorities, sort of where we've been and where I think we're headed. And I would say what has been enormously obvious is that this is the session where we are dealing with both COVID's immediate impacts and its ongoing long tail impact. The great news is that we have a vaccine that is being put in arms today. That is a truly remarkable fact that I think 10 years from now, we'll look back and sort of look at this, the work that scientists did to get to multiple vaccine candidates in the same year of the pandemic as sort of the proof of this is how humanity came together. They sort of put down their differences, they identified a problem, and they went and solved it. It is truly, truly remarkable. And certainly while I have certainly thoughts about the vaccine distribution here in Maryland, this is a very challenging logistics problem. Had I been in a different place, it would have made some different choices, but I think what we have to do now is do whatever we possibly can to get the vaccine out as safely and efficiently as we possibly can. It is the golden link to everything. If we care about the economy, if you care about education, if you care about local government, everything comes down to how well and efficiently we can distribute this vaccine, that there's confidence in the program, and that people's lives, people feel safe. Because right now, our economy and way of life is entirely related to public health. The two are inexorably linked. And until we deal with the pandemic fully, we'll be in this mitigating state of affairs for over and over and over again. So we knew that coming in. So we have to help people hold on. I was incredibly proud of the work that we were able to do. Members of the Senate, we were able to help. The governor introduced his Relief Act, which had some basic tax mechanisms of tax savings in order to help people and small businesses hang on. The Senate put together what we called the Recovery Now Amendment, which was about a $500 million additional source of resources for those who have been the most vulnerable and most impacted. I think that is a story of this pandemic, is that it has not hit everyone equally. I think the level of fear is probably equally applied, but the impact on education, on the economy, on health, it has been very, very disparate. And so we know that we have limited resources, as all of our municipalities do as well. And so in that environment where you have limited resources, we had to make sure that we got the resources to those who needed it the most, so that they could hold on, and that we could really look at the second half of this year as a year of recovery and rebuilding. If we had not moved forward with some sort of immediate relief, it's sort of what we saw in the Great Recession, when we didn't quite deal with the foreclosure crisis the right way. It stuck with us for years. What we can't afford to do is the unemployment, the level of economic pain, the disparate impacts of this virus. If we don't boldly address it now to help people hold on, it will be with us for the next decade. So I'm very proud of the work that we were able to get done. The House then incorporated some additional measures, including one of the largest expansions of anti-poverty policies that we've had, with the expansion of the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is a phenomenally economically efficient way of investing in working families to help them put dollars in their pocket. And really, it's not in their pocket, it's into our local economy, at grocery stores, for rent, for basic necessities. It is one of the best tax credit programs that we have in our arsenal of trying to reduce poverty across the state. So we came together on a bipartisan basis. The bill passed as amended unanimously in the Senate and almost unanimously in the House. I don't think the General Assembly has acted that quickly on something so consequential and large. in the last probably several decades. This has been, I think we all were united in what we needed to do, and hopefully that money gets quickly to the municipalities who need it, because we tried to make sure that we hit all of the varied entities and individuals who at least we know have had a disparate impact. So that's been priority one. We rolled out last week another series of policy agenda items around telehealth, around evictions, around really making sure that our healthcare system is functional, essential worker protections, that are really geared at taking what we've learned over the last 10 months and trying to make sure that we change our policy and infrastructure operations to be better off on the back end of this. And so this is what the legislature is best suited to do in a crisis. The executive is who we often rely on to lead. Where the legislature has its sort of competitive advantage is looking at not the immediate crisis, but where do we go through the crisis? And that is where we are really spending the second half of the General Assembly session, is where are we going next? How do we hang on, and then how do we make sure that we are better off on the back end? I'm sure that many folks saw the veto overrides. There were only a couple of controversial ones. The good news in the budget forecast is that we are in a much better place than I think we all thought back in May when the vetoes initially had occurred. We still remain hopeful that the Biden administration's plan will move through Congress as fast as possible. That's another sort of stimulus opportunity that's out there that I think will have an enormous benefit for state and local governments. And hopefully it provides some flexible funding that will allow us to make some strategic investments in things like broadband, digital access, reopening our schools, things that will, we know are going to be very expensive endeavors, but could in the long run make us way better off. The third major priority has been around equity and inclusion. The pandemic has exposed a lot of the gaps that existed well before the pandemic, but have only been exacerbated as COVID-19 has sort of ravaged through communities. In fact, I think it was most solidified with the CDC's recent report last week that showed that Americans overall had a life expectancy decline, but it was not equal. White Americans, the life expectancy decline was 0.8%. For Black and Brown Americans, it was between 1.8% and 2.4%. So almost double or triple the reduction in life expectancy over the year of 2020. That is a remarkable, horrific reality. And it is not the virus itself, the chemistry behind the virus. It is really the systems that have led to inequitable outcomes for all too long. It is the health disparities that existed well before the pandemic. It's the access to fresh fruits and vegetables. It's the economic opportunities. And so this summer, as that became clearer and clearer, I asked my fantastic President Pro Tem, Melanie Griffith, to lead up a work group that would focus on three specific areas: environmental justice, health disparities, and the creation of intergenerational wealth transfer. These are three areas that are just absolutely essential that we have to get the foundation right. And so this bipartisan group of senators, it was about 8 senators who worked on a weekly basis, digging through old reports, looking at old legislative efforts, what worked, what didn't, why didn't it work. And they put out in December an outline of 47 recommendations, looking at procurement processes and access to capital and ensuring that there's mortgage marketplaces. They did phenomenal work, really having hard conversations about race and class and the history. And it was white senators, Black senators who really all unanimously came together to put forward a really thoughtful foundation of how we can move forward. And so we have a number of pieces of legislation on that front that I'm glad to sort of follow up with, and if anybody is interested. The final thing I want to touch on is something that's sort of very much in my I'm thinking a lot about these days, particularly this past week, and that has to do with police reform. And today we had the announcement, we had a press conference earlier because we had the Judicial Proceedings Committee move forward 9 pieces of legislation that are all now on the Senate floor. Well, one will be coming additionally next week, but a package of bills, a series of bills that are aimed at restoring trust, accountability, and transparency in policing. And when you think about this COVID experience, normally the mind jumps immediately to the health and hospitals and maybe even health disparities. For me, I think I also jumped to what happened over the summer, which was sort of the societal pandemic, where we had to confront the reality of the injustices that too many of our neighbors feel on a daily basis. This sense that the system is rigged. And when you think about it, when you think about law enforcement, it is the only institution in all of government that we, those of us, the consent of the governed, have handed over the literal right for around decisions of life or death. And so that means that there is an enormous duty and respect and regard for law enforcement officers, but it also means that duty comes with an enormous responsibility. And when there is a feeling amongst members of our community, amongst our neighbors, that responsibility is not being upheld, the system does not work. It is a fundamental breakdown in our societal social contract. And so what is crucial is to find policies that really enhance and give people, no matter their race, no matter their creed, that they will have equal justice under the law. And so these 9 bills that the Judicial Proceedings Committee has been working on, I will say, are some of the most comprehensive approaches to law enforcement reform that we have seen in many, many years. And we go from things like demilitarizing that prohibit the purchasing of military-grade equipment, as detailed as to ensuring that there's more transparency within departments so that people know if they file a complaint, they know what happens, so that they believe that there is not a sense of separate justice if you're a police officer versus somebody else. And I think what's really, really important about this package, the most important thing, is that we're in a time where people want to make this kind of you're with us or against us moments. That is not who we are as a people. We have to be able to think through things in a more complex fashion. And this is not about individual law enforcement officers. What I think the challenge we are facing is the system. And that system has been built over hundreds of years with policies that have led to the disparate outcomes that we have seen. And so these 9 bills really move towards this sense of greater transparency and accountability that is absolutely necessary to make everyone safe. And that includes members of the community, but it also means police officers. If we can restore and truly set the foundation for transparency, for accountability, and for trust, that makes everyone in our community safer. And so those bills will be, I'm sure people will be drawing up amendments over the weekend. They'll be on the floor on Tuesday, and next week we will be deep into this very hard and complex conversation about how do we reform a system that is the bedrock of any sort of organized government. And I think we are in a really, really strong place. The Judicial Proceedings Committee, 5 of the 9 bills came out unanimously. 6 of them, of the 9, came out with bipartisan support, and there was detailed, deep review. And our chairman, Will Smith, has been doing just phenomenal work to keep people at the table, to work through these hard problems. And we're going to be in the midst of it next week. And then, of course, it goes to the House. So that will be a large focus as we finish through session. And I look forward to the comments and questions that folks may have that I can help address if those are if interested.
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned earlier that it had been a very, very long week and you might not be as energetic as you normally are. You're always the most energetic person I know. We really appreciate that energy.
Thank you.
So get to some questions before I know you have to leave in about 10 minutes. But as you know, MML's top priority this year legislatively is restoration of highway user revenues. And we have a question in the Q&A. Can you give us any update from the Senate perspective on the MML priority and where that bill might be?
Certainly. And of course, I can't believe I forgot to bring up highway user revenues. That is a signal that it's been a long day that I didn't bring up highway user at MML. So look, I'm going to give you the very candid, transparent thought. We are looking very closely. We have the highway user revenue bill. We have looking at the I-95, 495 P3 project out there, as well as this transit solutions investment in transit. All of these pieces of legislation will have enormous impacts on the Transportation Trust Fund, which of course that makes sense. It's transportation funding. What I am concerned about is that if you look at our Transportation Trust Fund, And there are two fundamental problems. One, we rely entirely on the gas tax that has, as the price of gas, now gas is going up a little bit right now, but as the price of gas had declined, even when we did the gas tax increase back in 2013, when we tied it to the price, it had not kept up with the expectations of what we would be expecting in revenues for the gas tax. So we have had a declining revenue source. The other issue is, particularly in the pandemic where people are driving less, as we become more fuel efficient, that's wonderful for the environment, and we should continue to push in that direction. But it means that the user fee that we base all of our transportation funding on, or the vast majority of the funding on, is a declining source because people are using less fuel. That creates a situation where you have heightened demand around the overall spending side and a declining revenue source. That doesn't work in the long run. And so the next 3 years, we're probably in an okay space. You get to years 4, 5, and 6, and things get a lot dicier a lot more quickly. And I think we have to have a very real conversation about how we intend to sustainably fund transportation infrastructure over the next decade. That's not something we're going to be able to tackle right now. It's in the midst of a pandemic, but I think as we emerge from this, it is probably one of the most important public policy issues that we as a state have to handle. And so highway user is wrapped up into that. Over the next 3 years, I think we'll be in a good spot. I don't know what year 4 looks like. And I have very real concerns about whether or not we'll be able to even consider additional state projects in the 4th year. And so we are trying to be thoughtful about that. And we want to make sure that we don't make permanent decisions around temporary problems. And so that is the frame that Budget and Tax is looking at this issue. And I think they're going to be taking it up probably in the next week or so and they're going to try to figure out a place to land. But I would say I wouldn't see a permanent solution moving forward.
I think MML has been on the forefront of discussing alternatives to the formula that we have right now, because as you said, we're very dependent on the gas tax. And as more electric vehicles come on board, and I mean, those vehicles get substantial tax breaks, but they're still using the roads. It's the wear and tear on the roads that we use the highway user revenue to repair those and build new ones. So we would very much appreciate being at the table. And certainly, you know, there are two sides to this highway user issue, and that is the sunset, which we fall off a cliff in 2025 or at the end of 24. If we could just get that eliminated, we would rest much more comfortable at night.
Right.
And appreciate anything you could do to help us with that. Understood.
Certainly.
Last question that I have, hopefully we can get one more in, but we're getting close. There have been a lot of changes in the way the General Assembly operates during this pandemic. Logistics of the session have totally changed, and those of us who are used to running into the state office buildings are finding it very difficult because we can't, have the access that we once had. Assuming vaccinations reach a critical mass and it's safer for larger groups to meet indoors, et cetera, what new policies and procedures that have been established this session do you think might carry forward to coming sessions when we're really back to more normal?
Which ones will carry forward?
Yes, sir.
Interesting. That is not where I thought you were going to go with it. So I would say it's too early to say yet. We're still in the midst of it, and I think we haven't quite figured out what things have been good or bad fully yet. I know there are a lot of concerns about the less access, which I am concerned about too, and it's something that over the next 45 days, when there's a lot of pressure to move things quickly, what has been most important to me, obviously we want to keep people safe, but we also can't diminish the quality of the work product with the level of information and insight and thought and collaboration that is required to do good policymaking. And so I have been so focused on how do we make sure that we're not moving things too quickly, that we're missing things along the way, that there are unanticipated, unintended consequences. At the end of this session, my intention is to do a really deep review of what worked, what didn't, One, for the purposes of, God forbid we ever have to do this again, and maybe for hopefully history's sake, we just have a game plan that I wish somebody else had made for me. But, you know, I think certainly making things more accessible and electronic, will very likely stay. A lot of the website improvements, a lot of the broadband, a lot of the streaming of like the floor sessions we've been moving in that direction already. That will certainly continue. You know, all the rest, I would say these were all, from the beginning, I wanted to be very clear. These are pandemic operating procedures. So this is not us changing our business practice. This is us operating in a pandemic. And so the default will be to return the vast majority back. And then as we assess to figure out, you know, electronic testimony submissions and things like that I think generally people have been supportive of, we will, you know, come to a new decision, but I would approach them as these would be changes from the reversion to where we were. I don't presume that things are going to, I didn't want to make, permanent decisions around temporary problems.
Thank you for that.
Any ideas of are there things that you like that?
Well, I certainly the access, the streaming has been wonderful. Mm-hmm. We can keep up with what's going on in the not only on the floor in the committees, but you know, voting sessions, things of that nature have been great. But for those of us who are extroverts and really enjoy being with people and being with the legislators, it's really been tough not having that access. Well, and I know where you thought I was going, but I'm not going to go there because we don't have time. But
it's been tough on legislators too. I'll say it is the most isolating session of all time, and it's impacting emotionally. That's something that I'm very mindful of. It's a very, very lonely session, which is not, you know, the whole idea of legislating is convening and bringing people together to write the laws. And we are not able to convene. We're not able to hash things out. And so that has been very difficult. I mean, there are many other difficult jobs. I don't want to make it sound like things have been, but emotionally taxing. And so I've been trying to avoid allowing that to impact the work as well.
Senator, before you run, could we get one more question regarding environmental bills?
Sure.
This session. We have a question, says there are several environmental bills that divert funds from the Bay Restoration Fund for other purposes. Many municipalities in the state depend on this fund for upgrades to their wastewater treatment plants. Do you have any thoughts on how any shortages in the BRF will be made up?
So we've been, this is the Climate Solutions Bill, which look is going to be a priority for the Senate to find a way to move forward, at least on the framework side. The Budget and Taxation Committee had a voting session this morning where they were starting to talk through the financial implications. I will say in the last week or so, there have been some issues that have cropped up that we're still trying to fully make sure that we understand. We want to make sure that things are predictably and sustainably funded. And so we may have to trim a few areas here and there to make sure that we have the resources to meet the commitments that we would be making. But you know, we'll see where we get to at the end of session. I would suspect that we will have something on the floor in the next couple of weeks around climate. But certainly would love to get MMLs if there's specific issues that arise, especially, you know, on BRF, if there's specific projects that are of concern, please send that our way so that we can make sure that we can incorporate those issues as we move forward.
Mr. President, thank you so very much for making time available to talk with us. We appreciate your continued support of Maryland municipalities. We know you live in the biggest municipality in the state.
That's it.
And we certainly cherish our strong relationship with not only you, but your staff. So
likewise.
Thank you so very much for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend, sir.
Thank you. You as well. Stay safe, wear that mask, and get the vaccine when you're eligible. Take care.
Thank you, Senator.
Bye-bye.
So I want to remind everybody before I introduce our next special guest that if you have questions, please post them in the Q&A. We want to make sure we get those early, and we'll certainly, as time allows, get the questions to our speaker. It is now my distinct pleasure to welcome today's second special guest, the Speaker of the Maryland House of Delegates, Adrienne A. Jones. Let me tell you a little bit about Speaker Jones. so that we know who we're meeting with. She was born and raised in Baltimore County. She earned a psychology degree from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County in 1976. She's a mother of 2 sons. The speaker retired in just 7 years ago from Baltimore County government after a 38-year career that included stints as the Director of Office of Minority Affairs, Executive Director of the Office of Fair Practices and Community Affairs, and Deputy Director of the Office of Human Resources. She's been a member of the Maryland House of Delegates since 1998, has served on the House Appropriations Committee, and was chair of the Capital Budget and Education and Environmental Development subcommittees. Speaker Jones also held the distinction of being the first African-American woman to serve as Speaker pro tem of the Maryland House of Delegates, appointed by the late Speaker Mike Bush to serve in that capacity for 16 years. And then Speaker Jones famously shattered that 2 glass ceiling when she was unanimously elected by her colleagues in the House of Delegates in 2019 to serve as the first African-American and the first woman Speaker of the Maryland House of Delegates. Speaker Jones, we are delighted to have you join us today. You're talking to Maryland's municipal leaders for this special town hall series. And a reminder, if you have questions for Speaker Jones, please post them in the Q&A, and we will ask her the questions following her opening comments this afternoon. Speaker Jones, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind invitation. I'll start off with just some opening comments and followed by questions as you had indicated. One of our greatest challenges and primary focuses this session is supporting Marylanders, their families and businesses, and helping Maryland communities recover from the pandemic. The Senate President, Governor, and I have been working together and with our federal partners to ensure that localities have the tools they need to aid in this effort. The General Assembly is working tirelessly to address the pandemic, and earlier this month, the legislature approved the Relief Act, which gives Maryland the highest earned income tax credit in the nation and will put cash in the pockets of low-income Maryland taxpayers. This act will also exempt unemployment insurance payments from state income taxes, keeping over $225 million in the pockets of unemployed Marylanders, and helps up to 100,000 small businesses and nonprofits to defer paying unemployment insurance taxes until the first 3 months of 2022 to help cash flow. I will also continue to make equity and diversity a priority in our state. This year, I introduced the first statewide legislative initiative aimed at building wealth and economic opportunity in the Black community. Not only does my racial and economic justice agenda focus on economic justice, but it works to expand diversity at the highest level, like in boardrooms and C-suites. And it offers more pathways to better health outcomes for minorities and their families. I appreciate the leadership and support from all municipal and local leaders during these unprecedented times. As this session continues, the legislature will continue to work to get Marylanders the help they need to get back on their feet after this pandemic. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to the discussion.
Speaker Jones, thank you for those comments. You have shown extraordinary leadership, particularly this session. And I guess one of the questions that I wanted to ask is, if you had any lessons that you've learned trying to lead the Maryland House during this very, very difficult time and an unprecedented worldwide pandemic. What could you share with us regarding leadership and how best to lead to accomplish such important goals as you have set this year in a very unusual time? Do you have any words of wisdom for us on how to do that?
I would suggest that, because as leaders, we don't know everything. And this pandemic was something that hadn't happened in over 100 years. I think it was, 1918 the last time. But during that time, we didn't have session because we were biennial. So this was a really first time for us to be able to have to deal with this. We relied on our health experts. We relied on talking with others from stakeholders, other people from other jurisdictions that went through this, other states. The main thing, we wanted to get it right because we were dealing with the people within our state. So we just sought the advice and we handled getting through this from the advice we have gotten, and we did our modifications. And we also knew it was important to communicate with the people that all of us were down here to represent. So we wanted to make sure that we had that avenue so they would know what's going on and also provide the help that they were seeking to all of us, no matter what part of the state that we resided in.
So I have to ask you this question because you're talking to municipal folks here.
Yeah.
Highway user revenues is one of the biggest issues that we have tackled, I don't know, probably since we lost 96% of that revenue back in the Great Depression. Any updates you can provide from the House perspective on where that bill is?
I think it's right. The last time I checked, I know that a couple of years ago, we we enhanced the local share through 2024. And I think this year budget provides 37.6 million, I believe, in highway user fund for the municipalities. And I also know there are certain bills that have been introduced that would further enhance local highway user revenues in the out years. However, without the uncertainty of the moment, strain, as you all know, Transportation Trust Fund, there are many tough decisions that will likely have to be made. So until I can say definitively, and because you would say, well, Speaker Jones said on, February 26th that, so we want to make sure we get it right, but that is something, obviously, I know that's very, very, near and dear, but we want to make sure decisions that we make are the right ones, and definitely will be communication directly with you guys.
Thank you, Speaker. It is very near and dear to us. As you well know, we are limited in the revenue raising authority that we have, which leads me to another question that has been posed. And by the way, anybody that's on the call that has questions, please post them in the Q&A. We'd love to ask Speaker Jones before she has to run. We had
session today. Yeah,
we saw that. We were sweating whether the Senate was going to get off the floor in time for President Ferguson to get on at 3. And now I know you have to get back on the floor because you've just recessed. But each session, municipal governments weigh in on dozens of bills that provide municipalities with new taxing authority, or would strip or modify existing taxing authority. Mostly we see the latter, to be very honest with you. Do you have any thoughts on broader authorization, perhaps giving local governments a local option tax option that would allow municipal governments more revenue raising options to lessen our dependence on property taxes?
We're always happy to look at bills that are innovative and help local jurisdiction. And I believe, I can't remember the number, what the bill's number was, but we just passed a bill that gives counties more flexibility on how they apply their piggyback tax. And of course, I know that's a big concern for what you're, from what you have just said. It's not the first time I've heard it. But we also are going to be very cognizant and thoughtful about any bill that comes through that has any tax increase on a business or families. But you know, we're always going to keep an open mind. And we have been known to kill a lot of bills that local government's ability to raise, you know, revenue. But no, I'm hearing what you're saying, and you know, I've been following. We definitely will be talking with the, you know, appropriate chair regarding this. So thank you.
I just wanted to note that there have been several posts in the Q&A just thanking you for your leadership, particularly on the police reform and social equity issues. Have a specific question. Are there certain steps that municipal governments with our particular level of authority and tools and municipal government's direct connection to local communities that we can take to support the racial justice and economic equity priorities you discussed, in addition to what the state is working on?
Yeah, they can. I would say part of the packet, the agenda deals with boards and trying to get so diversity on boards. So we have individuals that have an interest in terms of that. We're always looking for, particularly those in a particular subject area, that these boards, you know, in particular some of these corporate boards that we have, that will be helpful to have the, you know, a pool of, you know, interested parties that would like to serve on those boards. That's one of the ones that really stand out. And also what they are hearing within their municipality. Is there something that occurred that we can be of assistance to as it relates to that agenda? We have like 9 bills that are out there that they're following, and if one of the bills strikes their, you know, it's a subject matter that they will be very interested in. We would love if they would want to either send testimony, you know, because everything is virtual. You know, we would love that to have from persons from the municipalities to, you know, give their opinion on a particular bills. And when I did the agenda, I had talked to people in state, local, and also municipalities regarding that as well. So I did have input from one of your mayors as well.
So one of the questions I asked President Ferguson, I need to ask you. There've been a lot of logistical changes that you had to implement in the operations of the General Assembly, specifically the House of Delegates this session because of the pandemic. Assuming that we reach all the vaccination, the herd immunity, and all of the things that we need to get to for larger gatherings and maybe a return to more normal. Looking forward to next year and subsequent years, are there any particular procedures and policies that you implemented this year that you see might continue in the future years when we're back to more normal?
Well, I'm waiting to see when that more normal comes. At this point, I'm dealing with what we're dealing with, and hopefully things will get back to so-called normal. But we put a lot of things in place because we have, you know, of course, triple the amount that the Senate has, and we're in 2 different locations. And, you know, and so everyone is spread out, and we have certain hours and everything else. So what I would see, if there aren't any more surges, no other, you know, issues, that there's some things that we probably may keep, such as some of these Zoom calls. So because and sometimes you're able to get more people in terms of this. So, but we're hopefully I'll wait as we get closer to the General Assembly to give you a definitive answer.
Well, we like the access that we've had to voting sessions and other things that have been going on that weren't necessarily available to everybody. The Zoom has had some very positive points, but I know you're like me. We miss being with people, and I know your members are just chomping at the bit to get with their constituents.
Yeah.
So that's safely, exactly.
Yes.
Reminder that if you have questions of the speaker, please put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A, and we will be happy to ask them of her. One of the things that I just wanted to make sure you were aware of, Madam Speaker, is the money that has come from the federal government that has gone to help local governments continue during this pandemic. The vast majority of our municipal governments have been allocated to the counties from the state, and the counties establish their own rules for if and when those funds are going to be shared with municipalities. It's obviously created some real consternation for a lot of our municipalities. We've had some counties that have been very generous in sharing the money that's coming from the administration from the state. Some have not been as generous. Has there been any discussion in the General Assembly of a more equitable and maybe direct distribution of funds to municipalities if the next round of coronavirus relief funds funnel through the state government into local governments, as it was with the CARES Act?
Well, we've been hearing from some of the county executive, and as lot, some have directly approached the governor, and I think the governor wants to make sure that things flow through his office. So we have been in discussion. Let's say it this way. I know what you're saying, and we're trying to work that out. I know the frustration, but the Senate President and I, we meet with the governor, I guess once a month, every 3 weeks, and we definitely will bring that up again, because you're not alone in us hearing that. So we're trying to work that out, that particularly it'd be more speedier, because your municipality, your areas better than someone sitting here in Annapolis to say what you're doing. So I just leave it like that.
We appreciate you. We appreciate you appreciating that.
Yeah,
very much. One of your legislative priorities acknowledges the importance of mental health, and seeks to make mental health services more accessible, especially given the challenges of the pandemic. Do you have any advice for local leaders and what they can do to help advance mental health in their communities, especially during the pandemic?
Well, we had a bill that we overrode. It was it set up a online registry of beds and services for mental health, and providers, we saw that providers were spending too much time looking for other providers, facilities. So we've been, talking with the providers to get involved in getting into that registry and get that registry off the ground, and get involved in and learn about the Greater Baltimore Regional Integrated Crisis System Partnership. This is a new program being stood up with $45 million from the HSCRC, to fund behavioral health crisis response infrastructure and services, and currently in the city, Baltimore County, Carroll County, Howard County. And it would be a model, I think, to use as it relates to the municipalities. So we can give you some more information regarding that, more details.
Speaker Jones, we can't tell you how much we appreciate you being a part of this town hall series today. We have really enjoyed, if that's the right word, hearing about the state of the session. It's been exciting, and certainly having it from your perspective as one of the two presiding officers, it's been very, very helpful to our members. I can tell you, we look forward to welcoming you in person to MML's summer conference, which we are planning to have in Ocean City at the end of June. We may be restricted, and we are probably all still be wearing masks, but we hope that you can make it to that event. And we know you've got to get back on the
do you hear the
I did. That's the reason why I'm saying I guess we better move along here.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being our special guest.
All right, let's keep the lines of communication open, okay?
Yeah, yes, ma'am, we will. Thank you very, very much.
All right, take care.
And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's Newsmaker Town Hall. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend. Please stay safe, and please take care of your neighbors. Bye, everyone.